Another Numbani map. Alright, we talked about Numbani already today. Notes on this one, let's see. Let's look at positioning, target prioritization, and alt usage. Okay. Individual mechanic stuff focused. So, looks like we're going to be jumping around a couple different supports on this VOD. So let's just talk about them as they come up. Fast forward a bit. So let's look at these comps. So, something I mentioned on the Ana VOD from earlier is not only is your positioning important, but where you're going to end up after you start getting pressured is important. So from this location as Zen, from this high ground, you have two choices. You got Zen and Ana together, which is good. You can help peel for each other. So together, you should be able to ward off any individual threat. If a solo Winston jumps you, you shouldn't have to give up too much space. You walk out of the bubble, you heal each other, and you burn them down. If a solo Tracer comes up behind you, you discord her, you take some shots at her, she's forced to recall. You can cover each other through a lot of individual threats, but the coordinated threats is what you need to look out for. When Winston jumps up with a bubble and Reaper TP's above. When Winston jumps in and there's a dynamite coming from underneath, all at the same time. Those are the threats you need to be ready for. And how you deal with that can be talked about in the pre-fight. So yes, it's obvious you want to play on this high ground. This is a very safe high ground. They're forced to use cooldowns to get on top of you. You have good kiting routes and good line of sight. Good. But are you going to play back here and kite through hulls? Are you going to play back here and kite down main? Are you going to drop into point if they come on flanks? What's going to happen based on how they roll out? And you're never going to know 100% of the time what the enemy's going to do. But you can prepare for, say, like worst case scenarios. You can prepare for when you can't handle a dive up here. Most easy reaction, obviously, kite into hulls. Drop down, fall back to second point. All those things are easy. But they need to be communicated because something we saw on another VOD is your Ana's over here, your Zen's over here, one goes this way, one goes this way, and then there's no opportunity for them to regroup and come together onto the point. So, in terms of positioning, you're starting off good. But it's not just about starting off. You need to think about what's going to happen in the mid-fight and what's going to give you and your team the best opportunity to not only come back into the fight, but come back coordinated and together.
The greatest enemy is that which lies.
So yeah, obviously this is a very safe location. Just a little right click. Just taking some free shots down mid. Just like, did you guys see that? He just like stutter stepped to dodge that shot from Ashe. Look, that Ashe is mad, dude. Look at this dodge. Just barely takes a step. I love it. Yep, very safe positioning. Very easy to spam down main. You're on a, what, AFK there? So, again, this is the danger of not thinking about what your potential threats are. So yes, you guys were in full control at this point. You were going aggressive. You got a bunch of picks. You're ahead, but that doesn't mean you're fully safe. So flanks like this, obviously, heroes like Tracer, Genji, Sombra are obvious flank threats, but you can't ignore Reaper either. And I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I could not hear a single footstep when he walked up. I don't know if he was crouching or what, but he got on top of you and killed you in 3 shots. So unless you know exactly where every opponent is, it's the depressing reload animation. I mean, honestly, even if you weren't reloading there, this is a tough duel to win. No doubt, undoubtedly, he still had shift up. He was here with full cooldowns, full HP. Yeah, didn't hear a thing in game. I didn't hear a thing in the replay viewer. So either he was crouching or that's just the sound design in Overwatch these days. So yeah, always be aware of your threats and always have an escape plan. Unless you have full control of this because you've been watching this flank, you know no one's gone there, I'd recommend not sitting right at the door and constantly looking back to check. this gives you the advantage of, one, avoiding this main angle. Unless you're taking shots actively down this angle, you don't need to be holding here. And it gives you this small cover to work with if they come from the high ground, and just gives you more reaction time, basically, to see anyone coming from there. Both you and Ana should be thinking about that constantly. You don't want to play too far up and expose yourselves to dive, but you can play here and be ready to deal with dive in either jumping back or going towards halls, but you'll also be ready to deal with this flank threat. So small positioning thing, very specific to Numbani, but in general, as Zen with no movement abilities, always be thinking about flankers, even if it's someone like Reaper who doesn't traditionally flank as much. Now Reaper's just tearing through your team now.
My ultimate is almost ready.
So, I haven't said too much because there's not a whole lot going on right now.
Is almost ready.
Number one thing, obviously you didn't know this Reaper. I saw twice. You could have spotted him in your peripheral vision. There was a time when he TP'd up here and your Roadhog even threw a hook at him. You should have known that this threat was where it was. But also just now as you were walking up, you could see him in the corner of your eye. So again, keeping an eye on your flanks. This can trigger one of two responses in my opinion. Either number one, you call these behind you and you operate with the understanding that he cannot get on top of you right away and you push aggressively knowing it's going to be a 6v5 before Reaper catches up to the fight. Or you look to respond to the threat before it gets on top of you. You don't need to start shooting at him right away, but you need to be keeping an eye on him, and then you and Ana together look... Wait, that's not Ana. This is Ana. Who is that? That's... Okay, that's a Junkrat. So you and Ana work together to coordinate against that Reaper, both of which require communication about him flanking and fast response about when he wants to go aggressive. So right now, this would be a good time to go aggressive in my opinion. When you see him playing up here before he makes a play to drop down, you can go aggressive here, walk forward with your team while still listening and looking behind you in case Reaper catches up to you. But your main focus is getting away from him by pushing into the enemy team and taking pressure away from the backline and into their front line. But yeah, like I said, you can also deal with this by just acknowledging him and having both you and Ana ready to deal with him. Tragic, again. He's doing a really good job of manipulating attention, only going in once Winston takes all that damage, and he's getting a ton of value. So I would say after those two deaths, you need to be hyper aware of this Reaper's playstyle. It's caught you off guard twice now, so you should be constantly checking flanks, constantly positioning in ways, near chokes, around corners, stuff like that, so that you can have a good view of things coming towards you and also have good escape routes towards cover. But your team's stabilizing, which is good. It helps that their main tank is going hyper aggressive to try and make the Reaper flanks work. So in a position like this, you've won this fight. Everyone's here. This is a six-person neutral fight. Positioning from here, you need to think about a couple things. You need to think about, one, the flank potential of Reaper, of course. Like I said, the threats, not just the Reaper threat, but the Winston threat, the Ashe threat, all these threats that can either take long LOS on you, close distance on you with a Winston jump, or flank on you with like Reaper, like we're seeing. So you need to keep your threats in mind in terms of your positioning, but you also need to keep the fight zone in mind and where you can be effective from in mind. So for example, based on this positioning, you probably don't want to be like far back here, or here, let me get a better angle. Based on your team's positioning right now, you probably don't want to be far back up here, shooting down here. Even though it's far away from Winston, it's not an LOS of Ashe who has to be running this corner, and it's not very accessible to flanks. This is a very safe position, but you're not going to be able to influence where the fight's going to happen, which is most likely going to happen either at this corner or extended along this lane. Alternatively, you probably don't want to be on the point. Yes, you're going to have decent angles up this lane, but you're going to have very weak kiting routes. You're going to be open up to flanks. You're going to be within range of Winston jumps, and potentially within range of Ashe, especially if she comes aggressive and peeks here. So what would be a good middle ground? I would argue both you and Ana should be playing up here. This is going to, yes, open you up to potential flanks, but as long as you're able to monitor Reaper crossing this line and crossing this line, whether he's like going in here for a TP play or going past here, you should expect him. And then, like I said before, you can either opt for a team-wide aggression while he's trying to set up, or you and Ana can mark him by just spending time looking for him, committing resources like sleep, discord, nade, forcing him to shift away. So playing up here, one, it gives you great line of sight to this entire fight zone, both at the corner and this extended fight here. And while it is in potential range of jumps, it's got much better cover than playing on the cart here. Yes, you can kite through here, you can kite around this corner, but this doorway is going to be much harder for Winston to push through, for Reaper to push through if he's coming from the opposite way, stuff like that. Just better kiting, good vision, and it's, again, yeah, it's still relatively dangerous, but it's much safer to play up here and force them to burn cooldowns to get onto you and have better chance of scouting them when they're coming towards you than it is to play here and leave basically this half of the map unscouted, and then also harder to react to Winston jumps. But I didn't even think of this before I started talking. The other thing you can think about as Zen is you can cover aggressive positioning, i.e. playing on this cart, even playing towards your front line, based on the fact that you have trance. So generally, there's things you want to counter as trance. Nanoblade comes to mind, Grav comes to mind, stuff, Death Blossom, Barrage. These are all good ultimates to counter with trance, but you can also use trance aggressively. You can use trance to cover your own aggressive positioning by playing near this bus, on this flank, pushing forward, to the point where, yes, you're expecting them to aggress onto you, but then you counter that aggression with a trance. And basically you waste their time for trying to pick you off because you know you're safe when you have trance. It also enables your team to play hyper-aggressive and able to capitalize on any resources they try to get onto you, which get nullified by trance, they can capitalize on because it wasn't focused on them. If that makes sense. That's kind of like a higher level thing, and you're kind of just baiting aggression onto yourself. This is something you see like, I think it was, I want to say it was Violet on the San Francisco Shock. He used to do this a ton on Zen, where he would basically, like, say the enemy's pushing in here, and your tanks are playing here, he would play like over here, so that the enemy would be baited to pushing the Zen, he would just trance, and then the rest of his team would push directly into their backline. It's like it's kind of like a gambit, where you're baiting them to approach you, but in reality, it's a trap. It's in reality, you want them to focus you, even though as Zen, that's rarely something you want. So something to keep in mind you can do with Zen, but typically also requires a good amount of coordination and team play. So I would opt for the safer route the majority of the time and look to just instead counter ultimate abilities, stuff like these, or just look to turn fights with trance. And like I said, look for safer positioning where you can have good influence, but still have good escape routes. Okay, that was a lot just on positioning here. But yeah, anytime you have got a little spare time in these fights like this, think about your positioning, think about where you can go in the time you have before the next fight happens, both for you and for the Ana. Very important. Oh my goodness. Oh, sorry. Drank my water wrong. Nice. Discord priority on the hook targets. Hello again, Archer. So that was good stabilization. I like that you didn't panic trance when the Winston got nanoed. That was very good control. And I liked that you did react to the Death Blossom, and then because you knew you stabilized after the nano, but then they kept committing, so you had to respond. So that was good. I'm not sure if you knew this in game, but the fact that they didn't have grav was also good. But if they did have grav, you'd probably want to save it for that cooldown. Oh, excuse me. What do you think, Archer? We got co-analysis here.
Be one with the universe.
So yeah, again, I'm not going to bring up the holding again, but during this time you could be looking to take better positioning. In this case, probably somewhere up here, based on where the card is, because the fight is usually going to come down around here, if not all the way extended towards the cap point. So be ready to fight around this corner. Safest way to do that on this high ground.
Acknowledged.
Not sure what your soldier was doing, but burned a lot of time. And he should be back on time. It's hard to say.
My ultimate is charged.
Another case of getting caught off by the flank here. This could have been avoided, number one, by being on the high ground and having better space to retreat into, instead of being forced to retreat into an angle that Ashe can still pressure. You can retreat through this doorway and cut her off from the high ground. That gives you more time to react. You don't need to stay in the fight when you're being threatened like this, but it gives you time to react, gives you time to communicate with your team, and make a coordinated effort to force this Ashe back. Instead, both supports get picked off before anyone can even react to it due to poor positioning. This is something you generally see around like low-ish ranks, like between gold, plat, diamond, I would say, where there's one player completely abusing aggressive positioning because he knows he's going to go unanswered. He knows the enemy team is thinking too linearly because, no offense to anyone in chat, but players at this rank typically don't think too much about their threats, in this case, the flanker. They don't think about what can happen. They're looking at what is happening in front of them, and they're trying to deal with that, not keeping track of everything else that's available. This is why you see so many, such high value out of like flanking Widows, flanking Ashe in this case, Tracer players, Genji players, who can just completely abuse the fact that your attention is focused linearly, and subvert those expectations by taking a strong angle. And the only way to counter this is by preemptively planning around this kind of threat. Because she was so passive all game? Yeah, it happens. People can change just like that. And again, like, even if this was the Reaper, if he got here, it means he can TP here. It means he can just walk into you, and you've got nowhere to run to.
Pain is an excellent teacher.
The payload has reached the checkpoint.
All right, where are we going to position here? So, third point's a little more straightforward. There's really only one strong flanking route for attackers. So this positioning, pretty good. I would say, unless your team's expecting to go aggressive really early, based on this ult economy, you could call for a Sig ult, play at this corner. If you're planning on playing that aggressively, then you could start here instead. But this positioning's fine as well. This one obviously gives you more time to react to people pushing in the front line. As a little bit exposed here, but there's plenty of cover as well, as well as a health pack for you to take back here. So this positioning's fine. Just like I said, you wouldn't be able to keep up with aggression if they were to fight right at this corner, so might be something to consider. But based on your positioning, based on your tank's positioning, it doesn't look like they're going for that anyway.
Embrace tranquility.
Your soldier's being real aggressive. Okay, we're checking our flanks. Good. I think you heard the Reaper shotguns and you got a little bit of PTSD. So, a bit of an interesting choice to kite back to here instead of, say, to over here. One, this is a more exposed position. It's closer to the flankers than you'd like it to be, and there's not really anywhere to kite to. Once you're stuck behind this pillar, you kind of just have to hope you hit your shots or hope someone from your team answers them before you die. Whereas going from here, of course, much better cover, as well as the option to retreat into spawn. The other thing about playing over here is you have a much better sight line, so you can actually see where your threats are coming from. As Zen, it's harder to hit your shots since they are projectile. It's harder to hit these kind of shots from this range. But I would argue to play safety first in most of these cases. You don't want to be taking duels. Even if it was just one of these people flanking, you don't want to be taking this duel as Zenyatta. It'd be better to survive their initial peak, say this Ashe peeking aggressively, survive the first few shots he takes, wait for one of your tanks, in this case probably your Sigma, to come back, give you a shield, and push them out with your support once your tank comes back. So overall, just generally passive play from your team, but also it seems like you don't have a strong understanding of where exactly you want to position yourself based on potential threats, and again, based on where the fight is going to happen. The fact that you backed up all the way over here means that you probably think the fight's going to at least happen towards the capture point, but as we see from your front line, they're looking to fight right at this corner, and you don't have great line of sights around this corner, most notably, but even at the corner itself, like I said, the range isn't great. I don't even think you can Discord or Harmony Orb from this range, so I'd like to see you play more over here. If you need to play defensive, you can play into the spawn and call your tanks back, but no reason to play this exposed. Oh, the madman, he escapes. And again, focusing too much at what you see your front line doing and not respecting the amount of threat coming from this flank. It was right in your face that time too, but I think you were panicking based on your tank plays. Yeah, got a touch. Nice try. Last fight, not much you could have done, to be honest. So yeah, to recap some of the things about positioning here, what you want to look for is a space that is able to mark and respond to threats, able to see the threats coming, in this case, and able to respond to them by moving into cover, but also be able to actively influence the area that the fight's going on. So if the fight zone is going on here, this kind of positioning is fine, even towards spawn is fine. But if the fight zone is further up, like towards that next corner, you'll probably want to be at least over here, ready to walk forward, but potentially even more aggressive by playing over here. Thank you for the sub. So let's look at attack.
0 to 3, switching sides. Initiate.
Skip forward. All right, we're on Baptiste.
5, 4, 3.
So obviously, Baptiste has a lot more mobility in his kit than Zenyatta. He's also a lot safer to play in general. It's harder to dive him. He's got a cooldown that stops him from dying, which is nice. So I think this is a good example of even just, it's such a little thing, and of course you're not at risk of dying here, but you didn't even check this angle. And this is a very, very common angle for people to take. If this had been a Hanzo, a Mercy boosted Ashe, a Widowmaker, you run the risk of dying here and putting your team back 20 seconds. So yes, it went unpunished. Yes, nothing really bad happened. But if you do this every single game, maybe one time out of 10 or 15, you'll get punished for this. And you'll delay your team unnecessarily. One sec. My cat is freaking out in a mirror. Stop! What are you doing? Okay. He saw himself in the mirror and he just started like running into it. I don't know. Little psychopath. So yeah, a small thing, but this is not hero specific or anything, but you should always be thinking about potential threats, not just focusing on what you're trying to do, also be ready for what the enemy's trying to do. Nice little lamp. Alright, not bad. So, a couple things. Let's rewatch this whole sequence. So this is kind of a small thing. I like the patience going into this fight already. You don't get pulled by Orisa, you don't get headshot by Ashe. None of the focus is on you right now, so you find the time to get into the space relatively safely. Kind of an awkward movement from your Sigma to just cross all that and then move in. Obviously, no need to charge your boots like this, but I like that you have a habit of charging your boots natively. This is something I had to actually like coach to some of the players in OWL, where you always want to have exo boots ready, almost always. If you're ever just holding a position, like unless you're crossing space and it doesn't make sense to be crouching, if you're holding a position like this, holding crouch to have exo boots ready to react to things is very, very good. Ideally, you're doing it around corners like this, where you have it ready and then you can like jump up to the high ground and then like kite back and forth, ping pong up and down with your boots. But even in neutral positions like this, like if, for example, if a Winston were to jump you, you could just jump away and avoid the jump damage. If a Tracer gets on you, you can like stop the one clip by jumping. Lots of good things can come from just having extra boots ready. So I like that you have this habit. But you probably don't want to jump too much, especially against double hit scan. You don't get punished this time, but there's a lot of... You could have just died to a single Ashe headshot there. Soldier and Ashe should have no problem shooting a target at that range that's moving in a predictable jump arc. So stick to jumping about when you have specific places to jump. And instead of reacting with jump when you're being pressured by hit scan, try to just evade them with more sporadic movement, with like AD strafing, playing around corners and stuff like that. Specifically to playing against hit scan. Good reaction with the lamp. I think it was a little aggressive to push right here. I think you could have had just as much influence by playing back here, and it would have left you safer, and luckily you didn't get focused down, but by moving into here, the Zarya, the Soldier, the Ashe, the Lucio even could have booped you further in and then just focus you down on point. If they had better coordination, if they were a better team, I think they would have done that. But luckily you make it alive. Again, the mid-fight jumping can be good, but I don't think it's something you should be doing non-stop. Again, charging the boots good, jumping non-stop bad, especially versus double hit scan. Or especially versus things like Hog as well. Instead, I'd like to see you playing maybe this corner. When you start getting pressured, you can jump up here, get an off angle. If they start pressuring up here, you drop back down. Or you can even go really aggressive if you have the space to work with, playing over here, jumping up here, dropping back down, jumping up here, using the corner, stuff like that. Be unpredictable, rather than just being on the point, up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. Which shouldn't be hard for an enemy soldier to track. Luckily, he was getting pressured at the same time. Think about where you're going to be jumping to and where you want to be safe. Again, similar to the Zen positioning we talked about on defense. You don't want to think about just moving. You want to think about where you're going to start and where you're going to end up during the fight. So if you want to end up here eventually, it's fine to like move back here with the intention of jumping back up. But you probably don't want to spend too much time just bouncing around on point like this.
Capturing the objective.
Yeah, if that Zarya had been focusing you and you did that jump, you would have survived no problem. So that's the benefit of having exo boots. Just primed at all times. Oof, there goes your... Okay, and that McCree as well, even more explosive damage. Kind of awkward your team went this aggressive, especially after losing one of your members earlier there. But I'm glad that you opted not to push up. If you were to try and push up there, you would just be another victim. Your team was too split up and not really coordinating anything from what I saw. So this has been a really chaotic fight. Another good example of jump to avoid the slam. In this situation now, you've won this fight, essentially. There's a few stagger kills to clean up. Again, you can be thinking about moving up, taking space like this. Something I mentioned on a previous support VOD. On this map specifically, it does make sense for you to be pushing the point. If one of your tanks is instead on point, then you should be moving up and be ready to fight up here. But since the cart is where it is and you want to be stuffing these members, number one, cleaning up these kills if you can, but also stuffing these chokes fairly heavily since it's the only way the defenders come back. It makes sense for you to push the cart up to like right here, and then for tanks to pressure these two chokes by moving up. In this case, you have a Lucio on your team, and the team would absolutely benefit more by having you with the team than they would from Lucio, since there's no one that really needs to be sped in when you're holding space. There's nothing you need to speed away from actively, and Lucio is much harder to focus down on point, obviously, as well as just having more healing with the front line. So in general, when you have a cart that needs to be pushed by a support, in general, you want Lucio there pushing the cart, unless, I don't know, he has beat and they're pushing up and they know they have grav or something, he needs to beat the grav, but that's not the case here. So if Lucio is pushing cart, then you could be looking to position up on these high grounds, position here, be ready to support at these two chokes, be ready to pressure them out and stuff like that. But it's not a huge deal. Just a small optimization thing, and again, something that needs to be coordinated between you and the rest of your team. Now that you see Sigma on point, this is when you should be looking to go up to the high ground. So let's look at this lamp. So it was good to react with lamp. Zarya needed this lamp. Absolutely. But where you throw, and I'm guessing this wasn't intentional how far you threw it. Obviously, I'm guessing you meant to hit it at this corner. I would say whenever you can, since it is a pretty tricky ability to get right 100% of the time, whenever you can, bounce it off terrain. Bounce it off this wall and falls almost straight down. It bounces back like a little bit, but it's way more consistent to just hit anywhere along this wall than it is to hit the arc to land perfectly right here. So if you hit it right here, it'll bounce a little bit, maybe land right here, still cover the corner. If you hit it all the way up here even, it'll bounce back like a little bit more, but it'll still cover the corner, right? If you hit it too low, it'll still just drop immediately, cover the corner. So whenever you can, you should be thinking in this instance, okay, Zarya is losing this duel. She needs immediate support. She needs the lamp to survive. But also the fact that you should be acknowledging she's kiting backwards. So you should be lamping towards her destination, not necessarily where she is right away. Sorry about the chat, guys. All right, that works too. Wait, I could just, oops. I don't know why I don't do this. I completely forgot about that command. So yeah, you want to hit, it'd be better to, like, instead of risking missing this tight corner, it'd be better to even hit it like back here, hit anywhere on this wall, because that's where Zarya is moving towards. And as long as you get her at the edge of it, like as she's moving into it, that's better than hitting it right on here, where she doesn't want to stay in this location anyway. The lamp's going to be exposed to the enemy Zarya's beam, and she might get focused down and followed up on, even if you hit the lamp. So yes, you were going for the right thing here, but you can make this a lot more consistent by focusing on the terrain you can bounce the lamp off of, instead of just the location that you want the lamp to land. And again, like I said, even though she could have walked forward and stayed in the lamp and maybe survived, that is not going to be her instinct. Her instinct is going to be get away from the threat as fast as possible. She probably didn't even register that the lamp was an option until she was already dead. Luckily, a nice play from the Reaper while they were aggressing onto Zarya. Again, this blue team is like making some weirdly aggressive choices. Kind of staggering in one by one and getting punished. But that's good news for you. Again, I would like to see Lucio on point. Alright. Hoping we see a window play here. An amplification matrix play. Also, a small thing, it seems like you do this half of the time, but not 100% of the time. You were aiming to heal this Hanzo, I have to assume, since no one else is damaged. But you have your crosshair like right on his head, and it's going past him when you don't directly hit his hitbox. Aim to hit, similar to how you would aim the lamp, aim to hit at his feet, and let the AoE do its work. If we just look at like the past 2 shots you took here. So like look at the height of these shots, and they just barely miss his model, but it means he's not getting the healing. Actually, at that point he was full health, so it probably just went through him. But again, this healing is not hitting anyone, whereas if you were just aiming at the ground here, you'd be hitting everyone. Just a small little consistency thing, but hitting the terrain as Baptiste is way more consistent than hitting all these moving pieces that are very hard to lock down. Oh goodness, that was scary. Okay, we're gonna rewatch this whole thing in a second. How are you winning this? We're gonna rewatch this whole fight in just a second. That was madness. Okay. Let's watch it from third-person POV, actually. This is insane. I can't believe you lived this. So one thing we're going to look at is your positioning during this fight. So 1, you hear the threat of the tac visor coming through. I'm guessing what's going through your head is you'd rather be on this side than on this side. Unfortunately, you do not have that luxury of crossing this space at this time. You do not have a solid shield in front of the soldier's face. There's no space to work with right now. You should be expecting them to aggress into you, and you should be ready to deal with that by kiting. Instead, we throw the lamp. Number 1, it doesn't immediately affect you. And if soldier wasn't having his shots magnet onto the Sigma here, which I think happens to be kind of lucky, he would be shooting you and you would be dead right now. If you need to lamp yourself for whatever reason, in this case, if you need to cross a gap, aim at your feet. Aim directly at the ground right here and throw the lamp down. It's better to just react and aim straight down with it if you need to instantly save yourself than it is to just try and get the most useful lamp possible by covering the Sigma, covering your cross, covering potential people hiding in this corner, stuff like that. When you're the one in danger, just lamp yourself. But he doesn't kill you, and then you jump out of the lamp, which is even scarier. So again, another case of when having Exo Boots charged is nice, but in this case, jumping is not the answer, especially versus a hit scan, especially with a hit scan with aimbot on. So very, very risky moves. 3 pieces there, every single one of which could have gotten you punished, but luckily it didn't happen. And then the Rhine pin, the grab is countered. We do get the isolation onto Ryan and he gets burnt down. Again, too much jumping, I would say. And then we combo Sigalt with Window. So, generally, a very good combo. Obviously, Window is limited by the fact that its area of influence is very linear and very telegraphed. The hardest part about Window is getting people to stay in the area of fire. Like I said, with about a lot of ultimates, it's the first half a second to 1.5 seconds of this ult that's going to matter. But when comboed with a CC ability like Sigma's ultimate, you can effectively laser down people very, very quickly who are stuck in midair and can't really dodge these shots. So this was a good plan. I think, if anything, you could have put this a little bit more aggressively, maybe like this, but I'm not going to nitpick. This is a fine angle to burn down the Zarya. And if you hadn't gotten booped here, I think you would have done a good job of killing her. Sigma unfortunately gets stunned and you get booped back. So we don't get the follow we want, but this was still a fine window. And now they're just walking into the damage. So another thing I talked about from an Ana VOD is instead of sticking with the cart, yes, I know you want to push it in, But in case something like this happens when a Reaper's TPing in, thankfully he doesn't have Death Blossom or anything, or a ball getting on point with like mines or something can very easily disrupt you. Use your range. Play back here. Play up here if you want to. Jump up here with the Exo Boots. Play if you want to get aggressive. Play over here where you have a safe line of sight to the point. Use the fact that all of their attention is going to be, holy shit, we need to touch the point. We need to touch the point or we're going to lose the map right now. It's 0.101 meters. They do not have the luxury of being able to focus you down right now. So you can play up here right in their face really aggressively. And unless they have tanks on point and they're readily touching and then have the space to work with to then look to make aggressive moves, you're going to go completely untouched. But just play up here. Don't run the risk of getting focused down almost by accident because they were already focusing down the point. Let your tanks do that job. If your tank should either be stuffing their choke so that people can't touch in the first place, or they should be responding to the people on point so that no one risks dying by contesting point. And most importantly, you. Of course, you have the lamp to cover it, so it's not a big deal, and you were winning so heavily at that point, it probably didn't matter too much, but something to keep in mind in the future.
Score.
Ooh.
3. Switching sides.
All right, we're gonna go through overtimes rounds real quick because I've actually got to go pretty soon. We're on Ana now.
5, 4.
Ana plays somewhat similarly to Baptiste. Obviously, you've got more precise healing. You've got more aggressive utility with the sleep and the anti-nade, but you've got a lot less mobility. If you drop off this high ground as Ana, you are not getting up until the fight is over.
3.
So again, very, very important for you to, in this case, you don't have a Zen or a Baptiste or another range support with you. You've got a Lucio. So peeling is going to be largely your decision because you're the one who matters in terms of peeling. If you need help from Lucio, based on their composition or whatever, you should be calling for him even in the pre-fight, expecting needing peel. But you as an individual need to be thinking about this flank, as we saw from the first round. You need to be thinking about what happens when you drop back here. You need to be thinking about what is going to cause you to drop. In this case, probably Winston, probably Reaper flanking and stuff like that. And put yourself in the best situation to not only survive, but be an active influence over the fight on point.
Defend objective A.
So we know their comp.
You're covered.
I think I heard footsteps. Oh no, I heard them this time. Oh, there we go. There's the awareness. And nice. So yeah, good stuff. Good awareness. Gave yourself a little bit more space. You're giving yourself more space now because you know he's there.
60 seconds.
Unfortunately, yeah, let's go back and look at when they burst through. I think this is largely part to your Reaper TPing away. You don't have the damage to punish these tanks pushing through. I understand the nade use. Ideally, these tanks would not be taking unnecessary damage. If they're not looking to poke, they should be hiding around here and then getting healed up before reaggressing. But this nade, unfortunately, the best way you could have turned this is to have a big anti-nade right now that hits these priority members, namely tanks, especially after Zarya uses self-bubble, and that gives your tanks an ability to go back in. Unfortunately, based on the way your tanks were playing, you didn't really have that choice. You had to try and save that Sigma. And now everyone's split up, and they've got that high ground for free. Good, you didn't drop off. Nice anti-nade, but it's not going to be enough now. You tried. Alright, we're going to fast forward to the next fight.
You're not getting rid of me that easily.
30 seconds remaining. Stop the payload.
Again, in these pre-fight situations, by staying on the ground like this, you're very much limiting your options for retaking this fight, both as a support and as an entire team. You're limiting the amount of map that you're covering. You're limiting your aggressive options when it comes to moving forward. You're going to be very telegraphed. It's going to be very obvious, and you're not going to have the same reach as you would by spreading out and taking high grounds and stuff like that. But that's not going to matter too much when their tank line dies. Alright, 10 seconds left. Nice. Good hold. Oh no. So, I know you were just being safe here, and really wanted to land the sleep, but you can absolutely hit Bob's arm and his leg right there to land the sleep. This is actually really funny. Where does this Lucio come from? Oh no, it's a Primaling Winston. Damn. I'm guessing you guys still hold this? Am I wrong? Oh no, I'm wrong, aren't I? Tragic. You hate to see it. But yeah, just again, another case of focusing on what's in front of you, not what their potential is. You should always be ready for them to reaggress unless you know they don't have ults, you know that there's members down that can't do anything and stuff like that. So safest way to play this, because their spawn is so close, because they had Primal available, whether or not you tracked it, play by the Scar, hit the sleep, play safe. Even if you don't want to sleep Bob, just play to fall back. You were at such a huge advantage, they had to touch one by one and then just reaggress and burn down tanks. But a little bit overextended. Not just you, your entire team, a little bit overextended. Everyone got primaled in. Really nice turn by that Winston, honestly.
You're covered. Speed boost.
Oof.
Feel their healing beat. This is my jam. Go. I'll keep you here. See.
What is that melody?
Ooh. Half a second earlier, that nade would have been huge. Your mechanics on Ana, I think, could use a little bit of practice. One, you seem very reliant on scoped shots in a lot of situations when unscoped shots should be giving you better chances to reposition, to move around, to get more rapid healing out and stuff like that. And also just a couple shots you're missing, a couple mistiming under nade. I think from what I've seen, this seems like your least comfortable support. But the positioning things I've said about the other supports still apply to Ana, of course. The same thing from from Zen still apply to Ana in terms of positioning. You can be a little more aggressive with Ana typically because you have escape tools. This is the one you play the most? Oh no. So it seems like you've been just a little bit reliant on this very defensive playstyle. I would say it almost looks like you're playing Zen and you're looking for like volleys in long range, when in situations you should be looking to position more aggressively. Again, high grounds like this, you could be looking to go aggressive, look for nades like this if you're winning a fight, look for early nade pressure on this high ground here. But instead you're opting for very defensive nades, very defensive positioning, and you're holding in your scope for a long time, indicating to me you're not thinking about repositioning, you're not thinking about your active threats, you're focusing again on what's in front of you, and it's leading to a little bit of tunnel vision. So, similar to what I said about Baptiste and how you should be aiming to hit like the ground around people and use terrain for your lamp and stuff like that to get the most and be the most consistent. For Ana, you should be using unscoped shots whenever you can, in my opinion. It's going to help you move around, have a better view of the map, just in general. Be ready for more things, just in general. Be ready to flick around and look around while still moving unpredictably and stuff like that. Scope shots should be used, obviously, for extreme range, for fast-moving characters like Tracer, like this Doomfist, and for when you absolutely need to hit your healing in like very clutch moments when... say when your Winston or Ball are jumping in and they're diving, you need to be able to heal him up in order for him to survive. When you are nanoing a Genji and you need to pocket him as he goes in, stuff like that. Like very crucial moments when you know pressure is going to be off of you, you can look to hard scope in situations like that. But I think you're relying on it a little too much. You just switch sensitivity. That also might explain a little bit of reliance on that. But yeah, just spend some hours practicing your mechanics. Do some Ana paintball lobbies to warm yourself up. It'll pay off for sure. Ooh, nice little sleep. Unfortunately, the charge damage went through and it left you at 25 HP. Should I play main instead of top here? It's an interesting debate. I could present arguments to either one. I think the fact that you had Sigma with you to try and clear this space and you had a ball ready to dive up here, and the fact that they had a split defense, as in they had both DPS over here, they had no one to pressure through this choke, means you should be able to line up resources to burst through it and force this Rhine off. I think playing top was fine. That being said, you can also play main and look for aggressive pockets. Oops. Look for aggressive pockets for your divers, for your Doomfist, potentially Lucio and Ball, where they want to go aggressive on these DPS members. You can pocket them better from main and be under less threat, since you can hopefully hear and see the Reinhardt coming and back up when you need to. Versus up here, you've got very little range to work with, and your ability to shoot across point is very limited. So both, I would say, are valid. It just depends on what both you and your team are trying to do. If your team is calling, they're going for a deep dive, they're going to focus these DPS down. We need to focus DPS before we take the point, stuff like that. And you're expecting Ball to do a rollout, then yeah, play main. Play main, focus your diving DPS. Let Sigma contest this ground if he wants to, or have him play with lane with you as well. If instead you want to focus down this Rhine, since he's playing alone, even your Ball can help like boop him around, isolate him down, slam him, and your Sigma shield can cover that aggression. Play with the team here, look for nades on Rhine, look for sleeps on Rhine like you did, and help ease that transition, and then you've got a great position to take over the rest of the point from here. So it's not necessarily just what you want to do, you need to react to what your team is doing and how best you can pocket that playstyle.
My team still needs me.
Coordinate your attacks on the
Go! I keep with you.
Hanzo, at your service.
Gotta be ready for that threat. Oof, spooky. In this case, since your Sigma's looking to, or I would say in general, for this point with this comp, you should be sticking with your Sigma. Wherever he goes, you should be using his utility to give you more space, and he should be using your healing so he can be more aggressive. Alright, we're moving. Oh, Sigma got split. Yeah, that was a bit miscoordinated. But your Hanzo's popping off. So let's look at that aggressive movement. Oh my god, this Zarya didn't get the kill. Oh my god, she's mad. But I just want to take a peek at this again. So yeah, obviously we're moving up to try and save the Sigma, but now we're making a rotation. It's a bit awkward that you and Lucio get split up. I'm not sure what the Lucio was going for. Maybe he was trying to wrap around to poop the Zarya, but some nice little jumps there, and some bad tracking from the Zarya help you out. Nice take.
Go! I keep you here. My ultimate is almost ready.
That which is unseen.
Objective A captured. Escort
You're going
the
to be
payload.
okay. The payload is secure.
This was kind of that push, just to bring it up sort of, is kind of a good example of the enemy team having some of the same faults that you do, where they lack the awareness, and that fast rotation just caught them off guard. That only Zarya was the one to respond, and yes, they had a numbers advantage, they just killed Sigma, but they weren't able to deal with an Ana pushing that aggressively, just because they were so discoordinated and because people were too focused on other things at the same time. So probably a lack of communication and coordination from the enemy team in that instance. Ooh, you can't be missing these. You were so tunneled on healing this Winston that you were staying on cart for so long and left yourself open to this huge threat. Not only were you open to this Hanzo when he was taking shots before he died, you were open, obviously, to the Earth Shatter coming through and this whole front line just walking up to you. If you are not ready for a fight on payload right here, you should not be standing on the payload. Use your range, use cover, play back here, using like this flank and stuff like that. Make plays with your team to take this high ground from the enemy, whatever it takes, but linear movement like this that's very predictable is going to get punished. And I understand you were tunneling a little bit on the Winston trying to land those darts, but always need to have a wider mindset, I should say. Looks like this is turnable though. Nice little Nano Reaper play. Alright, we slept the Bob this time. Nice. A little bit scary. And again, during these mid-fights, no reason you need to stay on payload. So if you need to take different angles to land shots, if you need to take safer positioning to get away from aggression, do that. Do not tunnel and being on the payload as a support during these fights. Similar to last fight on your attack, on your first attack, I should say. You do not need to be the one on payload as a support. Unless you're like Brigitte or Lucio or someone that can be in close range effectively, you should not be the one there. Oh, and the AC9. So, overall, a lot of the things I'm seeing are purely positioning based. I could harp on mechanics, but I don't think that's as helpful. A lot of these habits will be cleared from just acknowledging them and putting the time in to sort of break them. Stuff like the Baptiste jumping, stuff like as Baptiste hitting walls and the floor and terrain instead of aiming directly at the character models. Stuff like as Ana not hard scoping too much, being aware of your flanks and using those unscoped darts when you need to make quicker movements and to cover more ground and be more aware. But positioning, you need a shift of mindset for sure. You play number 1, 2 defensively. When you're on defense, you don't think about retaking space and moving aggressively into a fight in the mid-fight, and you need to think very proactively about how you're going to be kiting defensively. So 2 different situations you need to be thinking about constantly. One is, should I be following up this fight? So this is like such a bad example, but say as the blue team here, should I be and you're positioned back here moving into this fight, should I be following my tanks into this fight? Should I be taking aggressive angle to follow the tanks in this fight? Should I be worried about potential aggression and be playing safer further back but not being able to output as much healing? Should I be taking the time? Do I have the time to take more aggressive high grounds and then have a better angle throughout the extended fight? All those things when you're going aggressive, but then when you're playing defensively, say you're the blue team, say you're starting on this corner, or here, let's use the blue pen. Say you're starting at this corner, the enemy's rounding this corner, pushing into you. Do you have enough space to kite back? Do you need to kite back to specific chokeholds or locations? Do you have time to move to a more defensive location? Do you have time to move back here? Do you have time to move to the high ground where you have much better cover and a great line of sight? All these things need to be firing off in your head, both in the pre-fight, where you're deciding where to start and then where you're going to be kiting to, but also in the mid-fight, where you have to make active decisions about whether or not you can keep up with the team, whether or not there are more threats you need to worry about that you haven't seen yet, flanking Reapers, flanking tanks like Ball, Hog, obviously heroes like Tracer are a huge threat. So you need to be always thinking about not only what's in front of you, but what is possible from the enemy team. What is going to pop out from the side angle that you're not ready for? How can you avoid that? And oftentimes in solo queue, you're not going to have a ton of help from your team in these kind of situations. There are exceptions, of course. There's going to be great off supports that are going to peel for you. There's going to be a great tank line that comes back and helps you out and all these things. But you should be doing as much as you can on your own to make those decisions, be prepared for those situations, and live through them and give your team the best shot at surviving any sort of enemy aggression by being ready to kite flanks and being ready to position safer and stuff like that. But also set yourself up to be as useful during these extended fights. So you're not just hanging far back all the way out of the fight so you can't help at all. And you're not just walking into the team so you're getting picked off in the mid-fight. You're putting yourself in a strong position to have basically this great view of the fight, be uncontested for as long as possible, and have the biggest influence over the fight as possible. But yeah, that's going to be it for this review. I hope you found that helpful. Thank you for your VOD submission.